Ms. Patel, can you call the roll to reestablish quorum, please?
Yes. Kasuga.
Here.
Fu.
Aye.
Harb Sheets.
Here.
Roll is complete.
All right. I hope everyone was able to eat a little bit or use the break a little bit. We'll go on and start agenda item number 7 on discussion and possible recommendation regarding proposed statutory and regulatory changes required to implement the EPPP Part 2 Skills Exam effective January 1st, 2026. And I welcome and Ms. Sorick to present this item, please. Thank you.
Good afternoon, committee members. The board staff have been diligently working with legal counsel to come up with a draft if the board decided to move forward with the EPPP instead of its own practice exam effective January 1, 2026 to get the ball rolling on what statutory and regulatory language would need to implement that two-part exam. So included in your meeting materials is the draft language. And I'm not sure how you want to go through this. The statutory section is very straightforward. It's just actually deleting irrelevant language. So that is pretty straightforward. I don't know if you want to do a motion on each, if that makes sense, missing to do that. And then we can, the statutory section is very short. The regulatory section is not so short. So maybe we can take page by page on the regulation section, but just take the statutory section as a whole, as a single motion.
That makes sense to me.
Okay.
All right. Does anyone want to make a motion?
Madam Chair, may I ask a question before we entertain motions?
Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Fu.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Sorg, I think it might be helpful to walk us through the statutory changes. I know it's the striking of section 2943. And that's the only item, but I just wanted to make sure that that is the only change that we're making, and that is reflecting the desired and requested changes from staff.
Yes, the only section that is recommended from staff is the deletion of examination subjects. Currently, the board has a law and ethics exam and does not have a knowledge-based exam per se. So this is a recommendation to remove reference to an examination for theoretical or applied fields in knowledge in psychology. We have authority to administer the CAPLE, the law and ethics exam already, so this would not eliminate any relevant authority there.
Understood.
Does that answer? Sorry.
No, it does. That was really helpful. I'm happy to yield to Dr. Harpsheets if she wants to make the motion, and I'm happy to second it.
Before we do any motions, I just wanted to guide that want to see the item. It's on the hand carry section. It's in the hand carry folder. Go ahead. Is there a motion coming?
It's fine with me, Mr. Fu. Go ahead and make the motion.
Thank you, Dr. Harpsheets. I move to recommend to the board to adopt the annotated statutory language in Business and Professions Code section 2940 through 2944.
I second.
So that there's a motion by Mr. Fu and a second by Dr. Harpsheets. All right, so why don't we go ahead and go over the statutory change first, and then we'll go over the regulatory language next. Do you want to take us through that section, Ms. Orick?
Sure. So 2943, examination subjects would be deleted. And this is in reference to an examination for knowledge in whatever theoretical or applied fields in psychology as the board deems appropriate. It may examine the candidate with regard to his or her professional skills and his or her judgment in the utilization of psychological techniques and methods. So the recommendation is to delete reference to that section.
Got it. And then next page. Oh, those are the regs. So that's the only thing for this statutory change.
So
Correct.
I have a question. It says through 2944. So what is 2944? I don't see that on here.
Hi, Dr. Harpsheets. This is Brittany. I think Mr. Fu just misspoke when referring to the range of statutes. The only statutory section that's being changed is Business and Professions Code section 2943.
Oh, okay. At the top of the page that we have in our packet, it does say 2944, which is probably where he was coming from. So,
good. I can see that.
So that should say 2943, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. On the agenda, it just mentions through 2943. So
Okay.
It was just on the document itself. It was mislabeled.
So do we need to amend the motion?
Yeah, for clarity's sake, Mr. Fu, I think it might make sense to amend the motion to refer specifically to Business and Professions Code section 2943, since that's the only section that a change was proposed to.
Sounds good to me. Thank you.
I second the amendment.
All right. Any other committee discussions with regards this section? Hearing none, Mr. Moderator, can you please open the public comments?
We are now accepting public comments on the motion. If you would like to make a comment, please type the word comment into the Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and send that comment to all participants. Dial-in users, please dial *3 to raise your hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. And now we're going to take about 15 seconds to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to return to the motion?
Yes. We would we would now go to the regulations. And
Madam Chair, do we have to call a vote for?
I was going to say the same thing.
Oh, yeah.
Should we vote on this first?
okay, before we go into, okay, go ahead. Ms. Prato, can you call the roll?
Kasuga.
Aye.
Fu.
Aye.
Harpsheets.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Motion passes. Now we're gonna over and discuss the regulatory language and Ms. Sorik, do you want to explain that first with regards to the strikeout?
Sure. So going through the regulation here, it might be helpful, and I'm sorry, this is kind of tedious, but it might be helpful to read the sections, and we can just go page by page if that works. And then at the end of going through the read through, if the committee wanted, we can make changes as we go along. And then at the end, if the committee is happy with the language, then you guys can entertain a motion on the language at the end. Missing, is that seem like an okay process?
I think so. I'd also defer to Ms. Halba, who thoughts.
I think taking a close look at the language is a good idea. Going page by page allows you to do it.
Okay, and I will defer to Ms. Snyder to start off with the reading of the language.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So we can start with section 1381. I'm just going to go over the highlighted items, or did you want every single regulation changes to be read?
Well, would it help us if you read or noted them all, because it
Okay.
gives us an opportunity to see it in its entirety?
Okay.
That would be helpful to me.
Okay. So section 1381, applications. All applications shall be accompanied by such evidence, statements, or documents as required to establish that the applicant meets all requirements for licensure as set forth in the code. And I was wondering, is there any way I can share the screen? Would that be easier?
I think that would be really helpful, and that way we can make changes to the language.
Yeah.
So if you can pull up that document, that way you can scribe.
Okay.
And if you're doing that, Ms. Snyder, I'm happy to read it if you're doing the scribing, because I know it's hard to do both.
Okay. Okay, so
just let me know either way.
That way we'll be able to
can everybody see
do it as
this?
well.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
And just a note that it says it's read only, so you might need to.
Oh, maybe I got the wrong. Hold on just 1 second.
Okay.
I have 2 documents open. I apologize. Hold on. Okay. There. Can everybody see this now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, I can take over reading since you're scribing. So we'll start with section 1381 applications. And I just want to point out for you, and apologies if this has already been said and I missed it, but the language that you see before you, the highlighted sections are those sections that would implement the part 2 as the national exam being a 2-part exam. The language that you'll see that's underlined or strike through without a highlight is language that the board has already approved for the pathways to licensure regulations that was done back in November of 2018. So we just pulled it out of that package and put it in this one because it relates to the examination. So I just wanted to add that piece of context to the language so you know what we're looking at. Okay, so all applications shall be accompanied by such evidence, statements, or documents as required to establish that the applicant meets all requirements for licensure as set forth in the code. A, an application to take the examination for professional practice in psychology, EPPP Part 1, shall include the following. 1, application to take the EPPP Part 1, revision XX, and that's note for the name of the document itself, hereby incorporated by reference. Written certification from the registrar or department chair stating that the applicant has completed all required academic coursework, exclusive of internship and dissertation, for the qualifying doctoral degree. 3, any application fee pursuant to section 1392. B, candidates submitting applications for the EPPP Part 1 received by the board by September 30th, 2025 must take and pass the EPPP Part 1 before January 1, 2026 to meet the national examination requirements for licensure. Effective January 1, 2026, candidates must pass both EPPP Part 1 and Examination for Professional Practice in Psychology, EPPP Part 2, to meet the national examination requirements for licensure. C, effective January 1, 2026, a candidate who has obtained a passing score on the EPPP Part 1 is qualified to submit an application to take the EPPP Part 2, which shall include the following. Application to take the EPPP Part 2, hereby incorporated by reference. Official transcript from the institution that confers the applicant's qualifying doctoral degree. 3, verification of experience, hereby incorporated by reference. 4, any application fee pursuant to section 1392. D, an application to take the California Psychology Law and Ethics Exam CAPLE shall include the following. 1, application to take the CAPLE, hereby incorporated by reference. 2, additional verification of experience incorporated by reference in subsection B, if applicable. 3, any application and examination fees pursuant to section 1392. And last, 4, evidence of fingerprint submission pursuant to section 144 of the code.
Can we stop here? I have a couple of questions.
Yeah, I was going to stop there. I just wanted to complete that last bit for the CAPLE.
Okay, so I have 2 questions. One was we refer to meet the national examination requirements for licensure, but they also are required to do these things to meet the California requirements for licensure. And we're not even sure if by taking these, they meet, other states might require other kinds of things. So I thought we should clarify that where that was listed twice, meeting the national requirements. And the other question is this an ASPPB guideline or regulation or I don't know, requirement that a person cannot take the EPPP Part 2 until they have received their doctoral degree. So we start with the question about the national examination requirements.
Maybe for clarification on that one, Ms. Halbo, could we say national examination requirements for licensure in this section is defined as meeting the requirements set forth by the Association of State and Provincial Psychology Boards? Would something like that suffice? So I can understand, Dr. Harpsheets, what your concern is, because then it sounds like, are we saying it meets all state requirements?
And yeah, and also, and this is a California regulation. So, you know, I could read this and say, one, that, oh, does it meet all state requirements? But two, well, do I really care? I mean, if I didn't know, one of the questions would be, well, okay, but what about California? And it's because it's a California regulation. So I wondered if we should somehow incorporate that it's required to meet California requirements for licensure.
It's not unusual for a board to have both national and state requirements. And this is the board's applications regulation section. So it states here you need the national, and then later on it says you need the CPP.
Okay. So in that sense, it goes without saying. But what do you think about us clarifying that we're not saying that this meets every state's requirement? So what Ms. Sorek was saying, maybe adding that clarifying sentence?
Yeah, we could easily put in at the end of the first paragraph, she had said national examination as used in this section means, and I didn't get the rest of it written down, but I thought it was really good. So, you know, just a brief definition. Was it it's the examination required by, and then the language for the national organization.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
So do you want it added in line item 25?
I think that's what's being suggested.
Yeah.
Okay. So can
So if
you
want to just put it down? So I think I said something like the national examination requirements
By ASPPB.
I think it was like in this section is defined as meeting the requirements set forth by the Association of State and Provincial Psychology Boards.
So my next.
Do we go back to the quick edit so that we have this right? You would just say the national examination as used in this section.
Yeah.
You don't need the, because you're using the term.
Oh,
so you just put national examination in quotes and capitalize the N. So then you're saying national examination as used in this section is defined as meeting the requirements set forth by the association. Is it of?
It's of.
Okay.
Yeah.
But that happens. It's hard to type
that
this way. Absolutely. And then is it boards plural? Association of State and Provincial Psychology Boards?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
But that definitely clarifies a term that could be confusing.
Yeah.
And I think we can put ASPBB in parens because I think this is the first time we're talking about it in this section. I also wanted to add a little bit of the context that because Dr. Winkleman is on the phone, CPA is sponsoring a bill about eligibility to take examinations, and our recommended amendment is to say as determined by the board, and this language addresses what that looks like. So I just wanted to add that little piece of context as far as a follow-up to the board discussion on timing for eligibility and what the process for becoming licensed, what that looks like.
Okay, so then where we say in section C that it suggests that the person is not able to take the part 2 until they have their doctoral degree, and the CPA proposed legislation is saying, if I remember it right, that as soon as they finished all their academic coursework. Is that true?
The language in AB 282, and Dr. Winkleman can correct me if I'm wrong, but the language in the existing bill now is that once the coursework for the qualifying degree is obtained, that any examination for licensure can be taken by the candidate. Now, it's my understanding, and I know our ASPPB folks are off the call now, but it's my understanding that one would need to pass the part 1 before taking the part 2. So that is for ASPPB a determination that has been made on their end. Now, the question for the committee today, and then ultimately before the board, is the timing of the part 2 after supervised professional experience or before supervised professional experience. And the same question would be posed for the law and ethics exam.
Right.
So I would just want to highlight that as well.
So do we have part C2 in here, not because it's a stated requirement from ASPPB? I'm not sure why or how the decision was made to put that in here, C2.
So yeah. I think the idea is because in my understanding, most of the programs, there's an internship that would happen before the degree is granted. Not in all programs, but in many programs. So a transcript would reflect a completed internship. And before a skills-based exam is administered, the question is whether an internship and or experience would need to happen first. And so C2 and 3 reflect that the staff recommendation is there would be experience before the skills-based exam is offered. But it's up to the committee whether you guys agree with that.
It makes sense logically. One of my thoughts, though, is if the skills-based exam is dependent on a person's level of experience and competence in that experience, allowing people to take that prior to completing the internship experience might lead to a higher failure rate. That's a concern. Mr. Fu and Dr. Kasuga, your thoughts on that?
Well, I share the same thoughts as the law and ethics exam, that that this is kind of like demonstrating competence, and being tested on it is you don't have to have the experience to take this test, and it actually might help them if they're like reviewing this, or if they're like if they have passed this before collecting hours. In terms of the risk for or the potential that it can cause higher failure rates, I think that that it is on the test taker to figure out if they're ready to take the test. I just think the same as the law and ethics exam, like that there is a certain part of readiness. Because my take is once you graduate from the degree, you should be knowledgeable in both because, well, you're taking the courses, you're also taking your practicum, and that is already building up that competence that is, you know, tested in large part. So that's kind of like my opinion about it. Like I'm putting the responsibility to know when to take the test on the applicant rather than prescribing when we think they're ready to take it.
Mr. Fu?
My perspective is that we should trust people to decide if they're ready or not. And if they don't pass the exam, then they take a moment of reflection. There is a opportunity cost each time you decide to take an exam, both in terms of the actual cost of the exam and as well as the time it takes. And so I think my perspective is that when it comes to the EPPP Part 1, if an applicant feels like they're ready to take that knowledge-based exam, that they should have flexibility to do that. I think from a sequential perspective, EPPP Part 2 makes sense after the 1,500 hours of SPE. That's how I would logically view it. And I think I've heard from and persuaded by folks who said, you know, we should be able to have self-determination in terms of where this goes. And I'm assuming that they take the responsibility of being able to succeed in that endeavor.
So are you go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. No, I just wanted to kind of like think. I also just wanted to answer the whole thing about the sequence of taking Part 1 and Part 2, and I know that is required by EPPP. But I think that if we worded moving forward as the EPPP 2-part exam, then it's built into that they first have to take the Part 1 and then pass it before they can take the Part 2. So that, and then the only thing that we're kind of like discussing is if for Californians, we would change and when they're able to take anything beyond being able to take it earlier, right? Like, but still like follow that sequence, the EPPP 1, EPPP 2. It's just like when they can take the EPPP 1 and when they can take the complete is what is being asked.
Well,
just wanted to clarify that.
It's saying here, though, in these suggested changes that we're requiring that they have already completed their doctoral degree before they can take the Part 2. And that's my question is, how do we really feel about that? Since it doesn't sound like it's an ASPPB requirement, are we okay with letting people take it once they pass the Part 1? That's just my question.
I'm speaking from a public member perspective and understanding what a licensing exam is supposed to do. The presumption is that the licensing exam is a part of a set of criteria that demonstrate a person's competency to practice safely in the field. And so for me, passage of the Part 1 and Part 2, assuming that the board adopts a Part 1 and Part 2, constitutes satisfying one part of that criteria. Dr. Harpsheet, I really defer to your experience and Dr. Kasuga's experience, as well as our licensed board members who have had experience taking these exams where you may have a stronger sense about when a person should or shouldn't take it. The last thing I'll just say is that if I was in this seat, if I was on the receiving end of this from where I would sit, I would want to make sure that in recognizing what the skills exam is, that I would have at least completed both my degree and also at least some time, at least my 1,500 hours of supervised professional experience, so that I have the ability to apply both what I've learned and observe what I've seen in a supervised setting to be able to successfully complete the Part 2 exam. So I'm not sure that answered your question directly, but that's certainly from where I sit.
You know what? I mean, I think it does get back to leaving it up to the applicant themselves to make that decision. That's my thought of it. But but have we verified that this is not an ASPPB requirement, that it can't Part 2 cannot be taken until after graduation?
I just confirmed that an official transcript would have to be required to be eligible to take the Part 2.
Okay, so that's an ASPPB requirement, right?
Yes, right.
Okay, yeah.
So
Okay.
that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay.
I think
So
that the only advantage here, sorry, Dr. Harpsheet.
No, that's okay. Go ahead, Dr. Kasuga.
The only advantage here is for EPPP Part 1 closer to when they are learning the knowledge, the information, so it's fresher, and that way that can prevent kind of like any restudying and all that, and like that can improve the pass rates as well. But I don't think there's any upside in terms of taking the competency, the skills based. I think that we should, keeping it as what the ASPPB requires and what we do require, right? Because like that's after getting your postdoc, pre-doc hours. California.
Okay.
The same.
So
I'm in favor of keeping it the same for the Part 2 because there's no upside to taking it early. But I'm also open to leaving it up to the applicant.
Okay, so then the question is, if we're being told by ASPPB that the person has to have the doctoral degree, and then we leave it up to them how soon should they be taking it? What do they want to do personally? Take it at the beginning of their postdoc or later? That's up to the applicant. Then the question is, do they have to pass the Part 1 and 2 before they can take the complete, right? I guess that's the next question for us to look at.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate Dr. Harpsheet, how you've ushered this conversation. And my response to that is I'm in agreement of keeping it that way as required by ASPPB. And I am open to having the complete be taken early. I think there is an advantage of knowing the laws and regulations in California for postdocs, and like approve of that and like reviewing that like while they're in their postdocs.
I'm going to jump off
valuable.
now, and I'll see you in about 45 minutes.
Okay. Well, I was going to say, I know in APA accredited programs, they have to have the law and ethics courses, and they have to pass those courses before they can go on to their formal internship. I'm not sure how that is for non-APA accredited programs, but so they're not coming out into internship without any knowledge of law and ethics. I'm just saying that. So are you saying, Dr. Kasuga, that you are in favor of the applicants being able to decide when they would like to take the CAPLE? So perhaps prior to the EPPP Part 1 even?
That's something to consider. I think that it's harder for me to kind of like, you know, think it through, because like, you know, the way I did it was like I did the EPPP and then I took the California test, and I'm kind of like stuck to that. And it's probably good to like hear thoughts from stakeholders in the public, and once we open it to the public, to kind of like hear other people's perspectives on that. I am in favor of an earlier taking the complete earlier, and leaving it up to the applicant to decide when to take that. And if they want to take it at the same time as they're taking the EPPP, it's on them, I guess, to manage that.
Yeah. So shall we, in terms of motions, are we wanting to, at what point shall we make motions? We want like at the end of all the regulation review, or
I think what we've done in the past is that the committee has gone by consensus on kind of each section or each page, and then at the end doing a motion on all the examination regs, for example.
Oh, okay. So,
but because these are such substantive issues, perhaps, and because it's divided by like, when can you take the Part 1, when can you take the Part 2, and when can you take the complete, it may be a good idea to get feedback from stakeholders on each of those pieces of the application process, so it helps kind of inform your consensus making on those sections. Just a thought.
That's helpful.
I think that's a good idea. Yes. Okay. So maybe at this point, it's good to open it up for public comments, and let's keep it the EPPP.
Just this section then of the regulation that we just talked about.
Yeah, like this one, the ones that we've already talked about on 1381 applications.
So just eligibility for the Part 1 and the Part 2, and then the CAPLE can be discussed after.
Yes.
Okay.
B. So we're keeping it on 1381 B. Is it B and
A and C? Mm-hmm.
Okay. Can we open the public comments on when to take the EPPP Part 1, Part 2?
We are now accepting public comments on 1381, when to take the, yes. Excuse me.
EPPP.
Thank you. EPPP. If you would like to make a comment, please type the word comment into the Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and send that comment to all participants. Dial-in users, please dial *3 to raise your hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests.
And we'll keep the comments to like 3 minutes as well. I think it's plenty of time.
Yep. We have a request from Dr. Elizabeth Winkleman. Hold on, Dr. Winkleman. We're going to send you a request to unmute your microphone.
It's Dr. Elizabeth Winkleman with the California Psychological Association. I wanted to have a couple of comments. Thank you for the opportunity to provide feedback here. As Ms. Sorg mentioned, CPA does have a bill right now that would streamline licensure. So what we support is we support streamlining the process to remove unnecessary barriers to entry in the profession and thereby increase access to care by getting people through that pipeline faster without actually removing or reducing any of the requirements, but simply allowing the applicants to have more flexibility in when they would take the exams. So what we would support is one application for all of the exams that could be taken after completion of the completion of the academic coursework. And so that would mean part 1, and then also CPLEE, which, as has been discussed previously, there's a lot of reasons for actually allowing the CPLEE before completion of all the experience. And of course, any requirements, ASPPB is saying that EPPP is going to be one exam. So any requirements that they would add on from getting to part 1 to part 2, that would just be part of the process. On their website, I could only see that you had to pass part 1 before taking part 2. Perhaps it's there, but I didn't see anything about needing to have the degree first. And in fact, what I saw was that it's up to the boards of psychology to determine when people are, state boards of psychology, each one to determine when the applicants are ready to take the EPPP. And also this would, in terms of streamlining licensure, right now you're proposing 3 different fees, 3 different applications. And really, with the needs for mental health care across the state and across the country, I think that a lot of boards and government entities are looking at how to streamline things. And the proposal here would actually be would be erecting like more applications and would slow things down in ways that echo what many of the people who commented earlier today on the earlier item were referring to. So I hope you will consider just streamlining this and having one application for the examinations after coursework is completed.
Thank you, Dr. Winkleman.
And there are no other requests for comments.
Now we open the public comments on the CPLEE. Mr. Moderator, can you comments to see if anyone wants to talk about or make a comment on when to take the CPLEE? And I know that Dr. Winkleman already shared it as part of AB 282.
The comment section is still open. We welcome anyone to mention a comment. We have a hand raised from Jen Alley. Hold on just a moment. We're going to send you a request to unmute your microphone.
I'm the Director of Government Affairs for the California Psychological Association. And I just wanted to state that, we developed our bill AB 282 that was mentioned earlier in response to some of the application delays that were occurring. And even though the board has really responded quite well and really addressed the wait times, we still have concerns about additional requirements being in place in the licensure pipeline. We're looking at, the worst behavioral health crisis in California and in the nation in a post-COVID world. And we really want to just get people through the licensure pipeline as quickly as possible without diluting any of the requirements. And I think that allowing applicants to determine independently when they're ready to take their exams is part of that, rather than submitting an application, waiting for approval, submitting a second application, waiting for approval, submitting a third application for the law and ethics portion, is really just kind of what we view as a barrier. And so there's nothing wrong with having robust and stringent requirements, educational and proficiencies being demonstrated through exams. It's just how those are completed and submitted is really the conversation that we want to have. And so we do appreciate the thoughtful comments of this committee today. And we, really want to move forward with the board in a way that really helps pre-licensees get into practice. And just so that we can all collectively address the behavioral health crisis that we're experiencing. And so again, thank you for your time. And that is all I have for now. Thank you.
Thank you. And that was our only request for comment.
This is Dr. Harpsheets, and we're back to the committee comments right now. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I'm wondering if Ms. Chung is still on with us. Since she's our licensing section manager, if the idea has been discussed today about one application for licensure that would to take these tests that would cover all test taking. And I might be putting you on the spot, Ms. Chung, but I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about the idea of one application that covers all test taking versus having to pass one and then apply for the next test.
Hi, Dr. Hopji. Thank you. It is a very good question, and we actually have been thinking about possible operational methods if the bill were to become effective. So I think some of the challenges is that there to be eligibility period to be considered, because right now the regulations maintain the eligibility period to be 12 months. So if applicants are determined which exam to take, if they were approved for both, then the eligibility period would need to be considered by the board or the committee to see if there's any changes, because that ties into the validity of the application. So there are a few moving pieces that would need to be considered.
Okay.
And that's my thought about that. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So you're saying from a practical standpoint, there's some things we need to see how that would really work. But yeah, thank you for weighing in on that for us.
Do you have any other thoughts, Dr. Harpsheets, with regards this discussion, given what we've heard from the public comments from CPA?
It seems,
and Ms. Chung.
Yeah, it sounds like the idea that let's let people make their own decisions about when to take these exams makes a lot of sense. Clearly, there would logistically, we'd have to think about, they would apply. How would this work? They'd apply after they have finished all their academic coursework, and then somehow we would have to know, okay, they've passed the part one, and they would somehow have to notify us. But yeah, I can understand the idea behind letting people make their own decisions about it.
Yeah, I like to streamline things as well. And I appreciate Ms. Chung's comments with regards to the eligibility period to be considered. So is so it's my understanding that for 12 months, their application is active, and so
You know, I have a thought.
that,
I'm sorry to interrupt. Sorry, Dr. Kasuga.
no, I was just like, my question is just, you know, to Ms. Chung. So, if I'm understanding correctly, is it that like we'll have to potentially make changes for or reconsider the validity period for applications if now it might take 18 months or longer than 12 months for an application to go through from applying to being able to take all the tests that are required?
Yeah, it would seem to me that if we recommend that the board adopt the idea that letting the applicants make those decisions, we would want, when that was presented, we would want some input from Ms. Chung about what that would look like practically.
Yes. So would it be possible to kind of like get like a presentation for the next board meeting in terms of how that would impact the licensing process if we are to streamline the application for one, and if we are going to make any changes to when people can start taking the tests?
Hi, sorry to jump in here. I just want to make sure the committee members kind of have a flavor of a couple of examples from Ms. Chung. Someone that may graduate years ago and then doesn't get their supervised professional experience until much later. Sometimes it's my understanding that the application process can take anywhere from 3 years to 25 years. So I may be speaking out of turn, but I know I've seen some of these examples, and we do have time frames for people to, you know, be able to obtain their supervised professional experience. And then the question is that experience still good for when they take the exam? And is that part of what you guys need to think about when you think of eligibility? And I also want to just add one more piece, and that's Dr. Phillips mentioned at the last board meeting that there's already complaints about the application process and what's required from the board. And if there isn't kind of a user-friendly, this is the step-by-step to get licensed, and it's just left up to the applicant, that may be another piece to consider. So first part, just wanted to get some feedback from Ms. Chung on what an applicant life can look like. Any anecdotes there? And then, yeah, just wanted to add that piece of context about the kind of step-by-step process. So the expectation from the applicant's experience is kind of laid out by the program.
Thank you for that. And I also remember Dr. Phillips bringing up how sometimes the options leave our potential licensees without guidance. So that's something to consider in terms of, you know, providing enough guidance and kind of like help potential licensees move towards being licensed in a more seamless fashion, even though it may be a little bit prescriptive and lacks flexibility versus it taking longer because of the lack of guidance of when to take things. I just wanted to, before Ms. Chong responds, I just wanted to provide space for Dr. Harpsheets to continue her frame of thought with regards the discussion that we're having.
Who are you waiting for, Dr. Kasuga?
You, Dr. Harpsheets.
Sorry, I was on mute. Okay, I'm sorry. Could you repeat the question?
No, I was just like wondering if like you wanted to speak earlier before I spoke and then Ms. Orick spoke.
Oh, no, I'm fine. I'm fine. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Chong, can you speak a little bit about these of some of the license applications that we're receiving and how this might be how changes may affect that process if there are no guidance in terms of when people should take the test, and we just like have more flexibility with regards to that.
Thank you. So I'll try my best here to kind of put this in a framework in terms of what we currently see, how it might impact us. We would really need to look at it into it more carefully with more details. I don't want to speculate too much about that process without having too much data on hand. But as for currently, applicants, the time frame, like the lifespan of the application do varies, and some applicants would be very quick. They would be able to get licensed within a year when they're on top of things, when they have meeting all the requirements, taking the exam right away. That could happen too. And then there would be situation that takes longer years, and that part, it could be because they were accruing hours. When they started the process, they don't have everything yet, which is not a requirement to have all 3,000, but a minimum of 1,500, whether it's pre or post or a mix of those. So afterwards, then they will go on and attempt for the EPPP. And then so this time also varies by applicants, because we give them the approved eligibility, and it will be on the applicant to decide when do they want to take the exam. And then they might take it towards the end of the eligibility period. Some might just decide to take it right away, or some might want to have some time to do some review and then take it somewhere within that 12-month period. And then if they pass, then they will have time to accrue any more supervised professional experience. Then when they accrued everything, the 3,000 hours, then they could come to us to apply to take the law and ethics exam. And then they also, after being approved, they will also have a year to take this law and ethics exam. And then if they, for some reason, not able to, they have another 12 months from the day of an unsuccessful attempt to try again. So that's kind of the examination process. Of course, once they pass, then they will submit their request for initial license, sending us any remaining requirements for licensure, such as fingerprints and the pre-licensure coursework verification that they have done those 6 required coursework. And then if everything looks good, everything's clear, then they will be issued a license. So that is the current process of how the licensure process could look like.
And Ms. Chung,
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, just for clarification, because earlier we heard public comment about if there are separate application processes, how that may bog down the application process. Can you speak a little bit to the workflow and if having separate applications for eligibility for each step, how that would potentially impact your unit? Because I think the concern is that because there are separate applications for each step, that would in turn add to the length of time that it would take someone to get licensed. I think that was the concern that was conveyed. Can you speak to address that piece?
Okay.
Yes.
Can I just ask, so Ms. Sorick, are you saying because there would be one extra application for the each part two, we already have these separate times now, right? And you're talking about adding that one extra one. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Because we already have some.
Right. And the proposal on the table is to have one exam application.
Right.
So I just wanted to address, having one versus having one for each exam, and then for licensure ultimately, how the unit would be prepared for that workflow and if it would impact the time frame.
Yes. Yes. Okay.
Sorry, I just want to make sure it's helpful for your discussion.
Yeah, it is.
Thank you. Go ahead, Dr. Dr.
No, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Thank you. You go ahead.
Go ahead, Ms. Chung.
Okay, I'll go ahead. So for the separate application proposed in the regulations right now, staff believe that is provide a clear structure for applicants because currently there's some confusion, even though we think that it would be helpful to, we have like 3 steps currently for the licensure process. So oftentimes we come across applicants, they were confused of which application to submit or submit the wrong form or a wrong application when they're not applying for the exam or for another one. So we thought that it would be helpful to clearly delineate, okay, this application is for this exam and what is required for that examination if you were to apply for it. And then for processing, by the unit, we will be receiving the application and then it will be according to the date received. We process and review them, and if everything is there and met the requirements, they will be approved when we're able to when it's their time to be reviewed according to the queue in the day order. And of course, delay is usually caused by deficiencies, which means that they either don't meet their requirements yet or there are missing information that is necessary for us to provide them with the eligibility. So that is kind of an unavoidable situation, even though if there's multiple application or a single application. As for single application, we will also still process it as the day order that they're received, but we also foresee some more confusion because applicants might not be able to provide all the information because there's one application they have to tell us, are they taking both or are they taking one exam or how, if we were to give them that choice, since I think the conversation here happening today is would like to allow applicant have that choice. So that would be one of the question. It might lead to more waiting times due to deficiencies if they were applying for the exam but not meeting the requirements. So that's just some of the initial thoughts.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I was trying to imagine if I was an applicant and I submitted this one application that says, I intend to take all the exams required. You would still need to hear from me. You would still need to hear from me, for example, after I took and passed the EPPP Part 1, you would need to know, or are we thinking that that would all be handled through ASPPB, and then at some point after from my own records, I would know, oh, now I've passed all 3 of them, and then I can notify you, and I don't have to have any interaction with the licensing unit after my first combined application and until after I've passed all 3 exams, so that in a sense, the unit wouldn't even be involved with me until I'm ready to, having passed all the exams, then I am now ready to take that final step.
Ms. Snyder can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's my understanding that ASPBB relies on the state's information for eligibility for each part of the exam.
Okay.
That is correct.
Okay, so that would not work. That the applicant, I would have to be again in contact with the licensing unit, who would still have to do something similar to what's happening now.
Correct. So instead of an application, which would be the queue for our analysts to take you to the next step, there would have to be some ongoing communication with the active initial application on file. Is that correct, Ms. Chung?
Yes, since the eligibility is approved, so we will have to do that with the applicant.
So it's not as simple as it sounds. The one application. There's more steps where they would have to be in contact with us.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah. That's what I was trying to understand.
Thank you, Dr. Harpsheets. I just wanted to go back to the language on the regulation on line 24 of lines 24 to 26 of 1381B. So I'm just thinking about the EPPP exam after January 1 will be a 2-part exam. And I wonder if we can refer it as, so effective January 1, 2026, candidates must pass that 2-part EPPP exam, and then in parentheses, part 1, knowledge, part 2, skills, to meet the national examination requirements for licensure. I wonder if we should refer to the EPPP exam after that point as the 2-part exam.
What line is that?
24 to 26.
And can you say again, Dr. Kasuga, what you were just saying? I'm looking at that.
So, to understand the before, you're referring to it as part 1. And then effective January 1, 2026, candidates must pass both, so that both EPPP part 1 and then it's spelled out again, examination for professional practice in psychology, EPPP part 2, to meet the national examination requirements for licensure. And I'm wondering if it's better to just call the exam after January 1st, 2026 as the 2-part EPPP exam, and then you can put a parenthesis, part 1, knowledge part 2 skills. So it will be effective January 1, 2026. Candidates must pass the 2-part EPPP exam.
I like that idea because it clarifies that it is a 2-part exam in one sentence. I think that's useful.
I think we were trying to use the terminology that ASPBB uses, and that's why we worded it the way we did. And I'll defer to Ms. Halbo if she disagrees.
And also that was the language that ASPPB was using earlier, and that was the reason why it gave me the idea to clarify it that way when they were talking about it being a competency exam with 2 parts.
Ms. Halbo, do you think there's a way we can explain it a little bit better and then also use the terminology ASPBB is using? If you're talking, I think you're muted. Oh, Ms. Halbo is in the attendee list. Mr. Bowie, can you promote her?
Working on it. Just a moment, please. All right. You should be back.
Yes, thank you very much. My connection went bad and I had to rejoin, and I didn't realize I was still down at the bottom. The idea, really, the point of regulations is that it's clear to the people reading it. And we had chosen this language because it was used elsewhere and it seemed clear to us. But that's if the board and these different members feel strongly that you could say the same thing more clearly, I think it's better. The goal is always the best regulations possible. So there isn't a right answer. There's what's clearest.
So I think my question is, the way we have it worded with the part 1 and the part 2 is how ASPBB references the language. But the question is to kind of elaborate a little bit more and to call it a 2-part exam to let folks know what it is. In addition to the technical terminology, would that be okay to do that? And how would that look if we added that in?
That would be okay, and it might be in better service to the applicants and the public in general, because it's a big change to take this test and suddenly say it's a 2-part test. Someone had started, the scribe had started trying to see where that might be a good place to enter that.
I think that
basically effective January 1, the EPPP is a 2-part test consisting of part 1 and part 2. Because that's the big shift, is effective January 1, the EPP will be a 2-part test made up of EPP-1 and EPP-2.
Dr. Kasuga, does that kind of get at what you were hoping for?
Yeah, and I think that 23, 24 would be a good place for that. So basically we can just like keep the same thing, but like say that effective January 1, 2026, the EPPP is a 2-part exam, or like what I suggested earlier is to just say candidates must pass the 2-part exam, and then in parentheses we can keep EPPP part 1 knowledge, EPPP part 2 skills to meet the national examination requirements for licensure. So that's my suggestion. Not unless you feel like there's a different section where we can add that, or to just introduce that it will now be a 2-part exam after January 1, 2026.
Okay, I like what the scribe did. She put, but you might say which covers knowledge, because you just have knowledge. And it's my fault. I would have you go back and replace the word test with examination. And then after the end parenthesis where it says paren EPPP part 2, put in parentheses which covers skills, because that's what it's billed to do. And then put a period. Oh, pardon me, end paren period. And then a space. And then I would just capitalize the T and say to meet the national examination requirements for licensure, both EPPP part 1 and part 2 must be passed. So you're sort of repeating yourself, but this is a C change for which maybe that brings more clarity.
Is this correct?
Let me take a look.
To meet the national examination requirements for licensure for both EPPP Part 1 and Part 2 must be met.
The better language would be to say both EPPP Part 1 and Part 2 must be passed to meet the national examination requirements for licensure, because right now we have it in the passive, and that's harder for people to understand.
But then it says it twice, and that looks funky.
Yeah. No, I'm just saying you should move the both EPP Part 1 and Part 2 must be
What
passed.
about
Move it
if
to
we
the
just
start of the
say
sentence.
to meet the national examination requirements for licensure, an applicant must pass both EPPP Part 1 and Part 2. Period. How does that look?
That's good. Do you still want the time frame in there? Because it's to meet the national examination requirements for licensure after January 1, 2026.
But we've already said that in
Yeah.
the prior sentence.
So do we need this last statement? To meet the national examinations used by this section is defined as meeting the requirements set forth by ASPPB. Do we still need this last statement?
Oh, you know what you could, where it says which covers skills, paren, take out the period and put in a comma. An applicant must pass both EPPP Part 1 and Part 2. So you're saying effective this, the exam is this, and an applicant must pass both.
Yeah, I like that.
So take this part.
Yeah.
Okay, then where are we? We got something missing where we wanted to clarify that we were using the words national examination based on ASPPB. So somehow we've got to tweak that last part of the sentence.
I think if we just start the last sentence with the national examination as used in this section is defined as meeting blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Capital T, yeah.
You don't need the prepositional phrase after you have an applicant must pass both EPP Part 1 and Part 2. You don't need the prepositional phrase to meet the national examination requirements for licensure, because you've already said effective of this date, it's 2 parts, and you must pass both.
Dr. Harpsheet, I'm wondering if you think we should add will be a 2-part competency examination or just like 2-part examination?
I think 2 parts fine at this.
Okay.
The way it's written, yeah.
Okay, sounds good. I'm fine with that too.
And I think at line 25, we're missing an and after the parenthetical and comma.
Right here?
I think so. What do you think, Karen?
That's correct. And actually with that, you don't need the comma afterwards because it's just two parts of the sentence together.
Thank you. I think that like provides clarity with regards it being a two-part exam.
Yeah.
Any other changes to the language given the conversations that we've been having in terms of section C and section D?
Dr. Kasuga, before you move on, I think in subsection B, the EPPP is referenced both as the EPPP and then as EPPP. So I think it might make sense to make that more consistent. For example, on line 23, between 2026 and EPPP, I think we could throw it in there. Line 23, I'm sorry.
What are you saying? That I see that in line 23?
Yeah, the EPPP is referenced both as quote the EPPP and just as EPPP.
I see.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you need an article.
Yeah, at 23. Yeah. And then one more time at line 25. Has both towards the end of. And one more at line 23. Two-part examination made up of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and then you
There we
need
go.
one in front of the long word examination. Because you've done the EPP part 1 paren, which covers knowledge and paren, and the capital E examination for professional practice.
I don't think we need to spell that out. I think can we just make it like EPPP part 2 because we've already introduced EPPP previously.
No,
on A, on line 11.
Well, we introduced the EPPP Part 1 on A, but we didn't introduce EPPP Part 2 until later. So that's why we spelled it out when we were revising this section. Do we still need it?
It's most clear.
Thinking that like we're only introducing what EPPP means, not really EPPP part 1, because that's the contraction. We're only contracting EPPP. But I'm not like a grammarian. So are we saying that we're only contracting EPPP part 1 on the first one? That seems funky to me, but it's
no, but
fine.
you're right. You could go to line 12 and put a parenthesis at the end of EPPP and then just have the dash part 1 and take out the end parenthesis. And then consistently, it just means those words and it either has dash part 1 or dash part 2 after that.
Yes, that's what I was trying to get at.
Okay, so I'm sorry. How do you want it again? I'm sorry.
Remove the end parentheses after the number 1.
Parentheses after the number 1.
Yeah, just back up
on
over
line
that.
12.
And then on line 12, yeah, she's there. No. You want to take out parentheses around the 1 and
I need to take
add
this
in a parenthesis after the P. It says EPPP. Right after you've given the long word, really, that's all you're doing is defining what EPPP means.
Okay.
And then it will consistently mean that throughout the document. And that means down in subdivision or subsection B, where we first said EPPP part 2, and we use that long, full acronym. Right. We don't need to. We can rely on the acronym and pull off, delete those words and the parenthesis around that phrase. Why don't you put a hyphen between on the next line down, a hyphen between the word part and one and the part and two.
Yeah, instead of part and two.
Yeah, we just didn't spot that. Good spotting. That we could do that more cleanly.
And I think there's a space after part, between the hyphen and the number and the T. There you go.
So isn't the dash triple B part two, like, wait, consistent with the EPPP part one? So
yeah,
so
you're right.
The dash comes before two. So it's consistent
right here.
So
look at the first line of B, and that'll tell you what's different.
So the dash, that's correct. The dash comes triple P.
Like that?
So there's no dash between part and the number. The dash is in between EPPP dash part.
No, what you had was correct. Now you're making it incorrect.
Okay, I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's hard to do it in language and
for
describe
line
it.
12, what changes do you want for line 12? Is this correct? Part one?
Do we need a hyphen? Do we need a hyphen? I don't think so.
I don't think so, but
yeah, we can just remove all the hyphens.
Okay, so I'm removing, there's no hyphen in 12, there's no hyphen in 13. Line 20, you want me to remove the hyphen here?
Perfect.
Okay, as well as 21. Is that better? Did I miss anything?
If you go up one line, you've got an extra space, but between part and two.
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
We would make those corrections in C as well.
Okay, true.
But then we're done with talking about EPP.
So we are keeping C the same as the suggested language. Dr. Harpsheets?
Oh, you're saying we're keeping part C as the suggested language. Yes, because it was confirmed, as I recall, that that ASPPB is requiring the qualifying doctoral degree before the person takes the part two.
Correct. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So moving on, there are currently no changes on D that was suggested. So except for of the fingerprint.
It sounds like the fingerprint has to happen. Well, it's listed here as though it has to happen after the CAPLE because that's been historically the last step.
Got it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So does it make sense? I'm asking this from a legal standpoint to put that in some separate section that just shows it's not part of the CAPLE process. It's just part of the overall licensing process. I guess I'm asking this as a legal question. or regulatory, just.
Yeah, you could move it down to being in an application for licensure shall include. It probably is a better 4 under E than it is a 4 under D.
Yeah.
So I just want to add our thought behind that. And I think it came from Ms. Hoganson, who had just worked on the regulations for the acupuncture board. And that was that they required that to be part of the law and ethics exam. And that way it was completed and the fingerprint wasn't going to be holding up the licensure process at the tail end.
Yeah.
I guess I would say that if we're going to take the approach that people need to be responsible, that we're leaving the idea of when to take the different exams, if that's what the direction we're going, and we're leaving those decisions up to the applicant as much as possible. Then this is just another part of it. They have to submit the coursework. It says pre-licensure coursework and all of these other things. So to me, it just makes some logical sense to make it a number 4 under E. Dr. Kasuga, do you have a thought?
Yeah. Sorry, I thought Ms. Sarek was going to respond. That makes sense to me too, to move it to E, especially if there might be some changes to when the complete might be taken. Okay. So,
can I just toss in on E? This was something Board Counsel Brittany Ang put in, and I thought made a lot of sense. For subsection E, subdivision E, 3, the third one down, it says evidence of pre-licensure coursework, and this was the pathways language you hadn't changed. She just said, why don't we put in the word completed pre-licensure coursework?
Oh, I like that. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I thought, good call, lawyer.
Yeah, right. Good. Yeah, that's really good.
And then that's where we ended. So Ms. Sorek, do you want to tackle the rest, E onwards?
I think I just had a clarifying question about the timing of the complete, because I think right now the language that we have in there addresses the complete happening after the experience. But I think one of the things that was talked about at the meeting was the idea of, for example, Board of Behavioral Sciences has their folks take the law and ethics exam before patients are seen. And then additionally, how it's treated for out-of-state applicants who have been licensed may have a different set of standards by being able to take the law and ethics exam before, whereas California candidates would need to complete their supervised professional experience before the law and ethics exam. Is that correct, Ms. Chung? Am I speaking out of line in saying that?
There are certain applicants that would be applicable from your description. So for example, for those who are licensed, if they don't have the 3,000 hours, then we will still ask for that to comply with the California requirements. Or even those who took the exam, talking about the EPPP under another state's jurisdiction, then we will still be asking them for the requirements to show evidence that they meet the California hours requirement, and then to take the complete if they have a passing score or whatever criteria that is set by the board for the new idea.
Gotcha. Thank you.
So I have a question. Are there other states, Ms. Chung, who have a lower passing score than California?
I believe ASPPB, if most states, if not, I think all states, but correct me if I'm wrong, that they're using the ASPPB recommended passing score,
Okay,
which should be the same.
the same. Okay. Okay. So by reading this, we're saying that if they can't take the CAPLE unless they've already passed the appropriate level of the EPPP Part 1 prior to January 1 of 26, or Part 1 and 2, whether or not they're licensed, right? So I'm going back to what Ms. Sork was saying. Are we giving these people an opportunity that we're not giving California people? But I don't see it. So am I missing something?
No, I think Ms. Chung answered that question, but I just had the clarifying question of when should the CAPLE be offered? Because this was based on earlier discussions, but we did discuss a possibly different timing for the CAPLE at our April meeting.
Right. Yeah. But we didn't come up with anything, right? We just
no, but we just kind of punted it to this committee because we had the actual language to work from. So the question for you guys then is, does this timing look right, or?
Yeah, it's sort of suggested as you read this that the CAPLE, it's just sort of inferring that it would happen after the EPPP is passed. But at the same time, we're being mindful of CPA sponsored legislation. And I'm wondering if just leaving it this way is okay right now, because it's not specifying directly.
Right.
Right. And so it kind of.
Because it's not part of the verification process, right? So 1, 2, and 3 ask for verification of, or 2 and 3 is the fees and the verification of experience. So you have to have completed your supervised professional experience, but that doesn't say that you have to have passed the Part 1 and the Part 2 before taking the CAPLE.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right.
So can maybe add language here?
Well,
or if the board, if the committee likes how it's written now, and maybe Ms. Halbo can confirm this, but it looks like someone could apply as long as they met the criteria in 1, 2, and 3 under D.
Yeah, I think this leaves it open so that we don't have to go back and change it potentially later.
Yeah.
But do you think that in our recommendation to the board, we need to include an idea of when we think the CAPLE should be taken?
I think that needs to be spelled out in regulation or not.
Yeah.
Got it. If we're going to make the recommendation to the full board of our thoughts with regards when it should be taken, we have to spell it out instead of leaving it ambiguous and tell them what we feel about it. To add language to it.
Do you think because we've spent so much time on this, we should open to public comment again before moving on? I don't know. I guess I'm asking that legally too.
I think if you're still in the middle of this section, it makes sense to complete it before moving on.
Okay, so you mean all the regulations, or
at least with respect to section 1381 as a whole.
That's what I'm wondering. I mean, I haven't heard, I sort of was thinking that we really are done with 1381, but maybe we're not.
Yeah, we're still on 1381, and I will open it up to public comment at that point. I also just want to acknowledge that I think Mr. Fu has rejoined us.
Hi, yes, I've been on since 2:25 and listening closely to this discussion around this, and just really appreciate being entering the fold again in this discussion.
Okay, welcome back. And
Dr. Kasuga, I'm sorry to interrupt, but before we move on from subsection D, I noticed that subsection D sub 2 talks about the additional verification of experience incorporated by reference in subsection B. I'm wondering if that's supposed to be subsection C, as I don't see a reference in sub B to the VOE, whereas I do at C3.
Yeah,
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 that's true.
true.
Good catch.
I think that was because that was from the pathways language. So that was before we talked about part 2. So thank you for that catch.
That's it. Thank you.
Okay, so just to bring us back to all on the same page right now, we are still considering revisions to section D and trying to finish up 1381 language changes, and then we'll open it up to public comment. And I also want to recognize that we're probably due for another break. So I'm just putting it out there. So Mr. Fu, do you have any comments since you've been in the fold since 2:25-ish?
No additional comments, and just really appreciate the discussion that you and Dr. Harpsheets have been having on this issue.
Thank you. Dr. Harpsheets, we've been talking about the need for additional language if we're going to make suggestions to the full board on having the couplee, being able to take the couplee independent of the EPPP.
So it sounds like the only requirement by ASPPB is that the person has to finish the doctoral degree before they take and pass the part 1 before they take the part 2, which is listed here. And if we were to make a recommendation to the board to, I just had another thought too. I'm going to ask this, and I'm going to add this other piece and ask that both be considered together. If we make a recommendation to the board that applicants can choose when to take what exam, except recognizing the exception from ASPPB, then the way this is worded leaves it open and takes care. But we would probably, as Ms. Sorek was saying, want to make a statement about that in the earlier part, at the beginning of this part of the regulation. I was trying to remember at the April board meeting when the proposed legislation sponsored by CPA came up, what our board's position was. I thought it was support if amended, but maybe Ms. Sorek, you could remind me.
Yes, it was support if amended to spell out as determined by the board. And these are the regs that would be the determination.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then I guess I go back to, it looks like right now they're open if we decide in a motion, and if the motion passes, to recommend to the board that people be allowed to take these tests whenever they want, with the exceptions stated by ASPPB regulation, then we would want a statement about that. I would say, like in beginning of section 1381.
I'm trying to figure out where would it be best to add that.
Yeah, maybe at the end in line 9.
Got it.
To follow there. if that's what we do.
Do you have a proposed language for that, Dr. Harpsheets?
No, I was just going to wait until we kind of went through all of the different ones, like we were saying at the beginning, that we would kind of go through it all and then come up with one motion to recommend to the board. And that way we would have also heard any public comment that we can take into consideration in our final motion.
Not for the motion, but for proposed language to add to line 9 if we're going to. Oh, are you saying that you want to hold off on
Yes, I would want to hold off until we came up
on
with the
line 9?
motion that
Got
it would be reflected in that line 9.
Got it. Okay, thank you. Okay, so what we can do is we can move on to F, and then after that we can take a break and then open it up to public comment. Ms. Sorick, do you want to read E and F?
Sure. So an application for licensure shall include the following. 1, application for licensure as a psychologist, hereby incorporated by reference. 2, any application fee as listed in section 1392. 3, evidence of completed pre-licensure coursework pursuant to sections 2915.4 and 2915.5 of the code, or sections 1382, 82.3, 82.4, and 82.5. And 4, evidence of fingerprint submission pursuant to section 144 of the code. F, out-of-state applicants shall submit an application to take the complete, hereby incorporated by reference and as described in subdivision C, if they have obtained EPPP eligibility by A, having taken and passed the EPPP Part 1 or after January 1, 2026, both Part 1 and Part 2, but are not licensed, or B, having taken and passed the EPPP Part 1 or after January 1, 2026, both Part 1 and Part 2, but are licensed in another state, Canadian province, or U.S. territory.
Any comments from board members, committee members?
No, it seems that feels okay to me. I don't feel that the way, for example, that F is written, that we are giving out-of-state applicants making it any easier for them than we are for our in-state applicants. Yeah, as long as I'm reading that correctly, but.
I agree, Dr. Harpsheets, and I think one of the comments we heard earlier was that, portability is not really something we should care too much about. And, I always get a little bit concerned when I hear that when we hear about telehealth and the role that telehealth is playing in terms of actually expanding access. And so we have temporary provisions for practicing in California when you're out of state. And if I remembered our very tortured discussion about the statutory and regulatory changes around that, that at the end of the day, a person who is engaged in telehealth does need to have fulfill California requirements. And so I think it's a bigger issue than perhaps we let on. And so I think this is really important to have this year.
Thank you. With that, let's end discussion from the committee side. We'll take do you guys want 5 or 10-minute break?
How about 7?
7, okay, let's meet in the middle.
Okay.
We'll return after 7 minutes and resume with public comments on section 1381. Thank you. Ms. Patel, can you please reestablish quorum?
Yes, Kasuga.
Here.
Who? Harp Sheets.
Here.
Repeating Fu.
I'm here. I couldn't wrestle with the mute button. I'm sorry.
No worries. Thank you.
Thank you. Quorum has been reestablished after the break. Before we go into the public comments, I just wanted to make a suggestion for the discussion earlier with regards to CAPLI and having it, adding something to the effect of having it, being able to take it at any time after completing coursework. Maybe it might be a good idea to add it on line 39 instead of line 9. I just wanted to kind of like get your input as well, Mr. Fu and Dr. Harp Sheets. So it will state instead an application to take the CAPLI shall can be submitted by an applicant at any time. Oh, an application to take the CAPLI can be submitted by an applicant at any time after completing all required academic coursework, exclusive of internship and dissertation for the qualifying doctoral degree, and shall include the following. So we'll insert that that language on that section to state our recommendation.
Can you repeat the language, please?
So an application to take the California Psychology, Law, and Ethics exam can be submitted by an applicant at any time after completing all required academic coursework, parentheses, exclusive of internship and dissertation, close parentheses, for the qualifying doctoral degree, for the qualifying doctoral degree, comma, and shall include the following. That's correct. And if you can highlight it, that way we know that we added that. So that's considered as part of the discussion. And I'll open it to the public comments. Mr. Moderator, please open it to public comments, please.
We are now accepting public comment on this matter. If you would like to make a comment, please type the word comment in the Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and send that comment to all participants. Dial-in users, please dial *3 to raise your hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. And our first request comes from Jen Alley. Just a reminder, you're going to get 3 minutes with a 30-second warning. I'm going to send you a request to unmute your microphone.
Good afternoon. This is Jennifer Alley with the California Psychological Association, and I appreciate this thorough conversation, and I kind of wanted to circle back to my original comments about streamlining the licensure process and addressing, applicant wait times. And so for every time that an application to take an exam is submitted, there's a waiting period at the board. Whether it's 30 days or 6 months, it's still a pause in the licensure process. And so when we talk about streamlining, we want to reduce the number of applications, which is why we said one application, let people determine when they're ready to take their exams. And so I'm going to be honest and say I'm a little confused, and I think maybe we could ask for clarification for the ASPP board. I think I may have said that acronym incorrectly, but I read it as that the part 2 needs to be taken after their supervised experience requirements are completed, which is part of their academic coursework prior to completing their dissertation. And so I think it would be helpful to clarify from the national board when they approve part 2 to be taken, because it's our understanding that part 2 can be taken after part 1, and that board will know who's passed part 1 and part 2. So there really ideally shouldn't be a reason for a second application to take the second part of one exam, because it really is one exam in 2 parts. And so we think that would help, get practitioners out there and treating consumers a little bit more quickly. And I think the same thing applies for the law and ethics exams. I don't know why someone needs to apply to take the CPLEE, because they've completed their coursework and they make the determination. And as to the comments about some confusion or lack of clarity for applicants, I think that they are adults who have completed or in the process of completing a doctoral exam to pursue their professional career, and that guidance and FAQs
30 seconds.
and steps for pre-licensees can be published so it's clear on what it is that they need to do. But I really kind of want to circle back to the need to address the behavioral health crisis and help practitioners get out into the field as quickly as possible, and that 3 separate applications for exams isn't exactly the most prudent or efficient way to move forward. And we really appreciate, the continuing conversation with the board, and would like to partner. CPA would like to partner with the board and the board staff on moving that forward. So thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Kimberly Boyd-Bowman. Bear with us just a moment. We're going to send you a request to unmute your microphone.
Thank you. I'd like to piggyback on that as well. I have similar concerns, and there was a statement earlier about the validity of the application staying open, and I have trouble understanding the need for so many different gatekeeping. First do this, prove that you did this, then do this, and then this, and then this, and then this, rather than the singular application where here you go, you need to take X, Y, and Z, send us your scores when you're done, and call that the application. I was an out-of-state applicant from a state that had master's level licensure and actually took and passed the EPPP at the doctoral level 10 years before I ever sought out licensure as a psychologist. So when I came to California, all that was necessary was that I submitted my EPPP scores. No one questioned the validity of them, even though they were from 10 years ago. What does it matter if the supervised experience was from 3 years ago or the test score was from 5 years ago? Once you've taken it and passed it, all that should be necessary is submitting proof that that has happened, which could be done with a singular application process, granting permission to do all of those things. It seems to me an unnecessary burden on the applicants and unnecessary delay in getting licensed by requiring a checkbox or a checkpoint at multiple different points. One application with granting all of these things, and then once all of those things have been proved that they've been done, a stamp of approval, here you go, here you're licensed. I think we could definitely shorten the process considerably with a single permission granting for all of these tests and then a singular application.
Thank you. Next, we have Dr. Elizabeth Winkleman. Bear with us just a moment. We're going to send you a request to unmute your microphone.
Hi, Dr. Elizabeth Winkleman, again from the California Psychological Association. I just wanted to follow up on the two previous public commenters and support their comments. And in addition, I wanted to point out just the practicalities of the processing steps at each time. As you all know, we did a survey last summer that showed 2 to 3 months wait time for each step in the licensure process. And I know that has been improved, which is fantastic. But even if it's, say, on the low side, say 2 months, that would be 2 months for one application for licensures versus 6 months total of waiting for 3 approvals. So it's a big, big difference to our applicants. And I wanted to support the suggestion that was raised earlier by some of the board that perhaps asking the staff to develop information for the next Board of Psychology meeting regarding how a single exam application might work. And then they could also look at what would be the overall processing times for 1 versus 3 exam applications. And, you know, the idea that this would be smoother and easier for the applicants without reducing the overall requirements. Also, it could make it easier for the staff that they would have an open application and then each item can be checked off as it's completed. And the other thing I wanted to mention is it's very confusing right now how one is licensed. I think what you're proposing here is pretty complicated, and that if you're concerned about providing guidance to people as to when's the most opportune time to take the test, that kind of guidance could be provided without making a mandatory 3 separate applications, to really try to make things easier for everyone. And the previous commenter made me remember my son just is a freshman in college. When you apply for college, there's a checkoff list similar to for the out-of-state applicants. You open your application and then you have to complete all those various parts, but there is no set specific sub-applications within that checkoff list. So I think that there's ways to streamline this both for the applicants and for the staff, while giving guidance to applicants about the exams themselves. And also to follow up on Ms. Alley, from what I have read on the
30 seconds.
Okay, I think that we should clarify with the ASPPB what the actual requirements are. From what I've seen on the website, it's mainly up to the boards of psychology to when people would be eligible to take the exams. The only requirement being passing part 1 before passing part 2, which is pretty straightforward requirement that would be automatic. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And we're going to take one last scan for additional comments. There are no other requests for comments at the moment.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Dr. Kasuga, this is Dr. Harbsheets. Can I ask a question?
Go ahead.
It seems like what CPA has been reading on the ASPPB website and the information we've been given is really different about when people are able or allowed to take the EPPP2. So I'm wondering, Ms. Sork, could you please clarify what we have been told directly by ASPPB, if I understand correctly on that?
Yes, the communication that I have received is that the transcript would need to be required to take the part 2. And the recommendation on their FAQ on their website is that the part 2 skills be taken after all supervised experience requirements are completed. That's not a requirement, but it's a recommendation. So hopefully that helps.
So the requirement they're saying is the doctoral degree has to be granted, and then there's a recommendation that people don't take it until the supervised experience is completed.
Correct.
I guess the other question I had, and Ms. Chung might be able to help us, when we talk about a new, like a new application at each step of the licensing process. It's my understanding, but Ms. Chung, please correct me if I'm wrong, it isn't a full application. It's like a notification that, okay, the ASPPB depends on the states to let them know about passing rates and that kind of thing. But it's really just not a very extensive process. And when we say application, it seems to convey that there's this big process that the applicants have to go through. But it feels like to me more of a notification to the board that they have passed. Is that correct, Ms. Chung?
Sorry, Ms. Chung had to step out for a minute. That is correct. It is more of a notification document than a formal several-page application. And I just want to reiterate something Ms. Chung mentioned, and that was when looking at the functionality of a single application, there would still be a lot of back and forth communication with the applicant as part of the different steps of eligibility for each next step of the process. So if the application triggers the next step, again, I just want to reiterate that that does not add to the time frame of the process. It just makes it a more predictable process for both the applicant and the analyst that's assigned to the applicant.
Okay. And I would like to also let people know that we do have that flow chart on the website now about the application for licensure process that I think is pretty clear and useful. So I just don't want people to feel that it's a really scary process that people don't know what's next and have to start over at each new step. Just as licensure committee chair, I've gotten to know more about what actually does happen in the process and have been encouraged that it is made as clear and as user-friendly as possible, especially recently.
Thank you, Dr. Harpsheets. And I think that your presence with the committee, given that you're also part of the licensure committee, is helpful. And I think Mr. Fu as well. So I'm really appreciative of that. Any other board comments or
Yes.
points of clarification?
I have a question for Ms. Sorek, actually. Ms. Sorek, my understanding is that 11 jurisdictions have adopted the EPPP Part 2. And I'm curious when it comes to their processes, if what we're proposing here is a significant departure from what those 11 other states are already doing.
We are actually currently working on a document which lays out eligibility and how it differs actually for purposes of the passage rate, but I think it'll inform both parts of the discussion that Ms. Snyder is putting together. And I'm hopeful that's going to be helpful as you guys continue to look at both the passage rate issue and the examination issue. We just haven't gotten a lot of responses back, so it's going to take some follow-up on our end to reach out to the other jurisdictions to get that information.
No worries, and I know it's hard to get folks to respond to you sometimes when their jurisdictions are also trying to manage their own policies. I think the other question, and I would be curious once the report comes out, I mean, it sounds like there might be a world where the advocates of saying, which is a misnomer, as you've indicated, this one application process could actually result in higher rates of people not passing. And certainly we'll be interested in seeing if that's a result that we see in the analysis and how folks digest that. Really appreciate that mentioning.
Thank you, Mr. Fu. with that, let's try to move on and tackle the next section. Ms. Orick?
Okay, section 1387. And since I don't believe there's any, we'll skip to the part where if there is any highlight in this section. This is just in reference to supervised professional experience. This was language taken from Pathways and put in here. And yeah, we did not have any changes to that language, but it was just to add context to the requirements and the steps before licensure. So if it's okay with you all, I will just skip to 1388 examinations and read through that section if that's okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. The board recognizes the expertise of the Department of Consumer Affairs Office of Professional Examination Services. The board shall utilize the services of the OPES in licensing, examination development, and validation through an interagency agreement. B, an applicant for examination shall submit to the board for its approval the required applications specified in Section 1381 and applicable fees as specified in Section 1392. The licensing examinations shall consist of the Association of State and Provincial Psychology Boards examination for professional practice in psychology, EPPP, and the California Psychology Laws and Ethics examination, CAPLE. An applicant who has met the criteria in Section 1388.6 of this chapter shall only be required to take and pass the CAPLE. Effective January 1, 2026, an applicant shall take and pass the EPPP Part 1 and the EPPP Part 2 to satisfy the requirements of this section. D, an applicant is eligible to take the EPPP Part 1 upon completion of all academic coursework of their qualifying doctoral degree, pursuant to Section 2914 of the Code. To satisfy this requirement, the applicant shall submit to the board a written certification from the registrar or department chair stating that the applicant has completed all required academic coursework, exclusive of internship and dissertation, of their qualifying doctoral degree. Such certification shall be provided to the board in an application as specified in Section 1381, along with the fee as prescribed in Section 2987 of the Code. E, effective January 1, 2026, an applicant is eligible to take the EPPP Part 2 upon completion of a qualifying doctoral degree and 1,500 hours of supervised professional experience as specified in Sections 1387 or 1387.4. To satisfy this requirement, the applicant shall submit to the board all documentation specified in Section 1381. F, applicants are responsible for completing any administrative requirements for taking Part 1 or Part 2 of the EPPP as established by ASPBB or its agents, including paying any fees. This subsection applies to those retaking Part 1 or Part 2 of the EPPP, as well as to those taking it for the first time. G, for forms of the EPPP taken prior to September 1st, 2001, the passing score is the score that was recognized by the board at that time. For computer-administered forms of the EPPP, the board shall accept the passing score recommended by ASPBB. Qualified applicants desiring to take the CAPLE shall submit to the board the fee set forth in Section 1392. Applicants shall comply with all instructions established by the DCA examination vendor for taking the CAPLE. The passing score on the CAPLE shall be determined for each form of the examination by a criterion reference procedure performed by OPES. An applicant for whom English is the applicant's second language may be eligible for additional time when taking the EPPP Part 1 and or the EPPP Part 2 and or the CAPLE. The applicant must complete and submit a request for additional time that states under penalty of perjury that English is the applicant's second language. The test of English as a foreign language, TOEFL IBT certification score of 85 or below must be sent by Educational Testing Service directly to the board. The TOEFL must be taken within the previous 2 years prior to application. The board will only consider the highest score of any TOEFL IBT taken within the previous 2 years. If approved, the applicant will be allotted time and a half when taking the examination.
All right. Thank you.
Ms. Snyder, do you want to scroll up? Okay.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Sorick. Any comments for the committee? Let's start with B. Let's go through it one by one. Hearing none. Oh, Mr. Fu.
Sorry, that was a hand that was previously raised. I'm lowering it now.
Okay, thank you. For C312, I'm wondering if we should keep it the same language as we changed it earlier with regards an applicant shall take and pass two-part EPPP examination with part 1 and part 2 to satisfy the requirement for this section.
Can you, is this the right line? 315?
Yeah, you're lined up right there and shall pass both the EPPP part 1 and the EPP part 2. Yeah, that kind of covers it.
I think that earlier we
removed it. Do we need to remove the articles?
I think previously we noted it as a two-part exam.
Oh, okay.
So pass both parts of the EPP examination.
Let me just look at that language. Hold on just 1 second.
Yeah.
Should be in here somewhere. Will be a two-part examination. Is that the one? Line 23.
Shall pass both parts of the EPP examination.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because you're trying to echo this language.
Yeah, I'm trying to echo that language.
Okay.
As appropriate for the next section.
Yeah.
And I apologize, it's now a different number because of the additions.
So I'm sorry, pass both parts? Or is this sufficient?
How about an applicant shall take and pass the EPPP two-part examination, or with both Sorry, it's hard for me to see the other one because I don't have it on my screen anymore.
Yeah, so then she would just delete after the word examination all the way up to the word to satisfy.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Okay, and then okay, moving on. Any changes to D?
I'd like to make a suggestion on D. This is Karen Halba, the regulations thing coordinator, our council. We just finished using the language. It's in the third sentence where it talks about, I'm looking real close to the screen here. At required academic coursework, it says of their qualifying doctoral degree. And in 1381, we say for their qualifying doctoral degree in subsection A, and we've just added the phrase for there as a part of the language Dr. Kashuga added to D. So I would change the word of on line 322 to read for.
So after dissertation, change of to for.
Yeah, because that's how we've described it elsewhere in other regulation.
Got it. And Ms. Snyder, if you can increase the size of the lettering at the bottom right-hand corner of the Word document, that way we could just see the language a little bit easier. Ms. Snyder? We can't hear you if you're talking, Ms. Snyder.
May have lost her. I'm checking.
In my house, that happens when the train goes by.
Are we able to take control of the screen or not at all?
The screen was attached. The document originated on her computer. So
Got it.
And it looks like she just exited out. So maybe she's trying to call back in.
Okay.
Apologies.
No worries.
Dr. Kasuga, do you want to take a 5-minute break so we can try and get back online?
That works. So let's resume at 3:31. All right. Ms. Berto, can you call the roll to reestablish quorum, please?
Yes, Kasuga.
Here.
Fu. I'll give you a minute to unmute. All right. Harp Sheets.
Here.
And repeating Fu. He is not unmuted. So did you want to wait a minute?
Let's wait a minute.
I do not immediately see Fu in the attendance
I'm here.
list. Oh,
Thank you.
All right. Okay. So let's resume. So we're currently making changes on D. Correct?
Okay, and I apologize, but you might have to reiterate. So effective January 1, 2026, an applicant shall take and pass, I think it was a 2-part national exam. Oh no, not track changes.
Both parts of the EPPP examination?
Both parts of the, wait. Yes.
How's that?
I think it was more concise earlier.
Sorry.
I think it just says an applicant shall take and pass the 2-part national examination. To satisfy the requirements of this section. I think the 2-part EPPP, I think it's just what it says, not national examination. The 2-part EPPP examination. And then on D,
take out the comma after examination.
On which line?
313.
Then in D on line 319, after the parenthetical expression, you want to change of to for.
That's where we got stuck.
Yeah, and then I have another one for the next one down, which is in subsection J. So it's a ways down. It's just a reference thing. You refer, oopsie, to the TOEFL. You'll notice that you define the TOEFL as the TOEFL IBT, but on line 361, you just have the TOEFL. You need to have the little IBT after it so that you've consistently referred to it the same way.
Got it.
Score.
All right. Any other changes to sections D, E, F? Hearing none, let's open it up to public comments on the section on examination, 1388.
We are now accepting public comments on 1388. And that includes a couple of people who were trying to comment earlier before we close comments. I believe we have Dr. Elizabeth Winkleman and Kimberly Boyd-Bowen. Dr. Winkleman, bear with us just a moment. I'm going to send you a request to unmute your microphone.
Thank you. No, I already made my comments. I don't have anything else to add at this time.
Thank you. Next, we have Kimberly Boyd Bowman. Hold on just a moment, please.
Yes, this is just a response to, I'm not sure which board member it was, but they had said that they felt that our process was very transparent and not confusing and not unwieldy sort of thing. And I wanted to challenge that a bit. California is actually the third state I have been licensed in. And it by far, even coming in with my EPPP and all of that, I found the guidelines to be more confusing than either of the other two states I've been licensed in. And the process, it was far more unwieldy and took far longer than any of those other states. Again, even with already having passed the EPPP. So I, with respect to the board member, I would encourage California to look at some other states and compare their application process and their requirements and orders in which things are done, because I do not feel that in its current incarnation, our application process is very user-friendly at all.
Thank you. And those are all of our requests for comment at the moment.
All right. Mr. Moderator, can you close the public comment section? Moving on, let's go to the next section where there are comments, changes. 1386.6, satisfaction of licensure requirements.
Okay, so 1388.6A, if an applicant for licensure as a psychologist has taken and passed the EPPP Part 1 or EPPP Part 2 for licensure at the doctoral level in another state, Canadian province, or U.S. territory, the applicant is not required to retake the EPPP, but shall submit documentation of a passing score on the EPPP Part 1. Effective January 1, 2026, an applicant shall submit documentation of a passing score on both EPPP Part 1 and EPPP Part 2. And I'm not sure why this is crossed out and highlighted. Oh, that's right, because we made that change after. B, if an applicant for licensure as a psychologist who holds a Certificate of Professional Qualification, CPQ, issued by the Association of State and Provincial Psychology Boards, ASPBB, shall submit documentation of a passing score on the EPPP Part 1. Effective January 1, 2026, an applicant shall submit documentation of a passing score on both EPPP Part 1 and EPPP Part 2. Such an applicant shall be deemed to have met the educational and experience requirements of subdivisions B, C, and D of Section 2914 of the Code. C, an applicant for licensure as a psychologist who is credentialed as a health service provider in psychology by the National Register of Health Service Providers in Psychology and who is currently licensed at the doctoral level in another state, Canadian province, or U.S. territory for a minimum of 2 years shall take or shall submit documentation of a passing score on the EPPP Part 1. Effective January 1, 2026, an applicant shall submit documentation of a passing score on both EPPP Part 1 and EPPP Part 2. Such an applicant shall be deemed to have met the educational and experience requirements of subdivisions B, C, and D of Section 2914 of the Code. D, an applicant for licensure as a psychologist who is certified by the American Board of Professional Psychology, ABAP, and who is currently licensed at the doctoral level in another state, Canadian province, or U.S. territory for a minimum of 2 years, shall submit documentation of a passing score on the EPPP Part 1, effective January 1, 2026, and an applicant shall submit documentation of a passing score on both EPPP Part 1 and EPPP Part 2. Such an applicant shall be deemed to have met the educational and experience requirements of subdivisions B, C, and D of Section 2914 of the Code. E. Nothing in this section waives the requirement as specified in Section 1388 for an applicant to take and pass the California Psychology Law and Ethics examination.
Can I recommend one correction to this? It's just repeated several times. And that would be to look at 1388.6 subdivision A, look at the very last sentence. So line 380 and 381. Right now, it reads documentation of A passing score on both EPP 1 and 2. We should take out the A and make the score plural. So it reads documentation of passing scores on both EPPP Part 1 and EPPP Part 2. Nope, nope, you're on the single line. You want to back that up and move down to 380. So score, you want to take out the S and give it a space, and down one more line. There you go. And that's where you would take out the A, well, over just a bit. And then that would be plural. So it would be documentation of passing scores on both this and that. The problem is that correction then needs to be repeated on subsection former C, now B. So down to line 391. And again on former subsection D, now C, which is 401. Nope, nope, nope. You're too high. Go down one more line. No, you want to keep the A.
Karen, could you also help us by giving the line number as well?
Okay, sure. It's 401. Passing scores. There you go. And then again on former E, now D.
What's the line number on that?
If she scrolls down, then I can tell you. It's line number 410.
Thank you.
There we go. Sorry.
Okay, I was like talking and I was muted the entire time. That's why people could not hear me. So I wanted to bring up the mention of ASPPB on line 388. Is that correct?
Hold on, I want to make sure I save this.
No worries.
And I'll just say, Ms. Sork, having been on the side of having to live edit a document, it is always challenging, and hardly ever anyone is satisfied, including the person who is making those live edits. And just want to say thank you for taking this role on while staff was attending to other urgent items that we've received.
No problem. We get used to pivoting.
Awesome. So since we've already referenced ASPPB, should we just use the abbreviated the abbreviation for it on line 380 4005 now? Sorry. Scroll down. Oh no, that's different. That's ABPP. Yeah, I think it's on section B. Sorry, we have to go up again.
What's the line number, Dr. Kisuga?
It's line number 388.
I'm just not sure if this is the first time we talk about it here. I know we talk about it in the applications section.
Okay, so it's per section that we're doing that because with EPPP we aren't.
I believe so, but Ms. Halbo can correct me if I'm wrong. And I think in this case, we're talking about the CPQ and not the EPPP.
Okay.
I think you're right.
So I think we're okay leaving it here since we're referencing something different from the exam.
Sounds good. Anything else, Mr. Fu and Dr. Harpsheets?
Oh, I'm okay.
Same here.
Okay, let's open it up to public comments.
We are now accepting public comment. If you'd like to make a comment, please start by raising your hand. We will open up the Q&A box momentarily. And our first request for comment comes from Kimberly Boyd Bowman. Hold on just a moment. We're going to send you a request to unmute your microphone.
Hi. If this is what is intended, that's fine. But I wanted to make note that with the language as it currently stands, you're not allowing any provision for grandfathering. And what I mean by that is, say you had a psychologist who was licensed in Nevada, let's say, and had been for 20 years. So they had passed the EPPP prior to the existence of Part 2. And you're now essentially requiring them to take an additional part of the EPPP that was not a requirement at the time at which they were originally licensed. So if the intent is to allow for grandfathering, then we may want to say something about for individuals who passed the EPPP prior to January 1st, 2026, rather than are applying. It's the difference in there. I hope that was clear.
Thank you. And that was our only request for comment.
I'm talking muted again. Which section was Dr. Boyd Bowman referencing?
I think it's all this throughout this section for each. And I think that's a good clarification because the way it reads, it does suggest that if you are licensed in another state 20 years ago, but you come to California after January 1 of 26, you have to take the EPPP. It does seem to read that way now. So I think it's a good clarification in each paragraph to add that wording. It does say in the first paragraph, the applicant is not required to retake it, but shall submit this. I'm talking about lines 377, 378, 379 at the beginning of it. But I mean, what do you think, Dr. Kasuga and Mr. Fu?
This is Seiran. I wonder if we can just do a global insert of a section that just covers the prior applicants instead of trying to do it line by line.
We probably have to do it at the beginning, but I think it's not too hard to do it. Let's see, another state.
So just to clarify, what the committee is saying is for anybody licensed in another state prior to January 2026, January 1, 2026, they would not have to take the Part 2. Is that what you guys are saying?
Yeah, if they qualified for licensure in the other state, prior to January 1 of 2026, then we've always accepted that licensure, right? And
Yeah,
that
right.
there's no reason to change that at this point. Correct?
I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah.
I was understanding you guys.
Yeah.
So is this where we would want to clarify that? Because this is kind of if you meet these criteria, then this is what you submit for, documentation of our licensure requirements.
Right.
I would say after on line 379, where it says the applicant is not required to retake the EPPP, but shall submit documentation of a passing score on the EPPP Part 1. And then if effective January 1, 2026, an applicant shall submit documentation of passing both parts.
Could we say something like accept language here?
Except for applicants who have been licensed in another state prior to the effective date, or we can have a separate sentence that speaks to that.
I was trying to kind of mirror the state, Canadian province language.
I think it's actually in the sentence before that you're working on right now.
Oh, okay. Or U.S. territory. Okay.
Except for those who have been licensed prior to the effective date.
Who are licensed. So we would say, except for those applicants who were licensed.
Who were licensed,
Yeah, who were licensed by another state. In 381. Yeah. Yeah.
Does that work?
Uh-huh.
Ms. Halbo, does that work?
That looks good to me.
I think there's extra language in 382. It looks like we have who were licensed in there twice on 381 and 382. I would strike where your cursor is right now, that we're licensed in another state. I think that whole portion can be removed. I'm reading that correctly.
So then do we need to add that same wording in subsequent paragraphs?
I think that covers it for out-of-state folks that are licensed.
Okay.
Because the other ones refer to
current stuff,
the CPQ and those things. So what we're saying in A is if you're licensed in another state and you've already taken the Part 1 and you're licensed, you don't have to take the Part 2 to become licensed in California.
Yeah, but it comes up again in D. And same with C, who is currently licensed in another state. C and D, it comes up. Right?
Yeah. So we're gonna add it on 391. Or sorry.
Okay.
Or 392.
And then again at 411.
And not here. For the National Register folks?
I'm just trying to see where is that here. Oh yeah. Yeah, we have to do it there too, right. On 401, the end of 401.
So my question is it clear that they still have to submit their EPPP1 score? They're just not expected to submit both.
That's a good question.
Oh. Oh, I almost wonder if it would be best to just put in a final paragraph here to clarify that. I'll just put something in and we can tweak it.
Where like I'm just picking 416, but it would be in every place where this is, where it says except for those applicants who are licensed by, I lost my train of thought, by another state. Forget, I have to go back. I lost my train of thought.
Let's see what Ms. Sork's language is at the end of F. And then we can see if we can address all the other sections with that one line. But we'll have to submit documentation of a passing score on the EPPP1.
I believe they dropped documentation of between submit and a passing score.
Does that work?
That works. I'm not sure if it belongs to the end though, or whether we should have it earlier. But I like the language.
This will probably be tweaked between now and May and throughout the regulatory process. So it gives
We'll
us
keep
a
it there
start.
for now. Got it. All right. Really appreciate that, like that comment, a public comment. And right now we have sections that are removed. Ms. Sorg, do you want to just explain why those were removed? And then we can probably entertain a motion.
So this is deleting reconsideration of the grade received on the EPPP or on the complete. And I have to be honest, I don't remember why we're recommending removal of this. And I can't see the participants list, so I'm not sure if Ms. Snyder and or Ms. Chung are on.
Actually, I think I may have a reason for this, Ms. Sorek.
Oh, great.
I think we discussed this in one of the committees I sat on previous years. I think there was a discussion, if I recall, with Dr. Phillips. Maybe this was an enforcement committee or maybe this was at a board meeting, but there was some discussion about how there was a way in that the board could waive the EPPP exam and could change that or essentially allow for reconsideration. And I think there was a sentiment that that's not something that the board should actually exercise or should even have the ability to do, and that the examination results should stand, and that the board shouldn't have that this board certainly has been restrained in our ability to do that. But I think the idea that this board and future boards shouldn't even have that discretion to do that.
Yeah, and I can say with the practical application of this that there is a process by which if someone had a concern about, let's say, a question they didn't perform well on in the exam, that they could contact the exam vendor. And I have seen in the past where if something did not perform well, that it was removed from later iterations of the exam, or it was brought to the attention of the, I'm blanking on the word, the test question exam experts. So I know that that's something that they can work with the exam vendor on. So it's not something that would go through the board anyway, because we have a contract with both ASPBB and OPS to administer the exam. We do not administer our own exams. We did in the past. Oh, Ms. Chung is here. Great. And she may have a more scientific explanation as well.
Mr. Moderator, can you promote Ms. Chung?
You should have the ability to unmute at will.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Hi, committee members. Yes, I'm back. And anything I can assist with?
We were having a discussion on section 1389 and 1389.1. If you have anything to add on the removal of those sections, that's where we're at. Thank you.
And I know you just joined us. So Ms. Chung, I was just saying that the board isn't in a position to reconsider the grades given on exams that we don't administer, that's something that's administered by the ASPBB and OPES. Would you
That's correct.
agree with that? Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Ms. Halbo, do you have any additional tweaks that you want to suggest?
Yes, please. If you went back up to 1388.6, it's on line 379. I saw it, but I was listening to what was going on and didn't see a moment to jump in. It was just a little one. 379. Darn, that's not the right line.
Things
Okay,
change.
scroll up a little bit more so I can see it. Okay, it is 379. Submit documentation of a passing score. We're missing the preposition on. And I have a few quick edits on 1387. And that's higher up, and we would just went over it because there weren't highlighted changes. But at 1387, in the first paragraph, and it's fairly long and it has no yellow highlighting. I checked this with board counsel Eng, and she agrees with me. Okay, yeah, it's on line 71. And it's referring to a section of Business and Professions Code subsection D, and actually C is the correct subsection. So I don't know why it was changed. I came in taking over for Heather Hoganson, the previous council, while this work was going on, and I did not catch this until I sat down and looked. So that's the first, thank you. Then if you scroll down to paragraph 1, subdivision A. This is small, sorry. On line 119, we say official internship placement with the start and end dates, plural. Those are 2 dates. And down to paragraph 1, subparagraph D. So again, I think.
What's the line?
I think we've blown past it. Let me check. Paragraph 2. Are we in paragraph 2, subparagraph A? Trying to find the line on my copy.
If it's technical, we can make that change after the meeting. I just want to be mindful of the time.
Okay, that one, yeah, that okay, if adding an S to dates is technical, fine. The next one is in subsection C, which, where the heck is C. So 163 line, on mine it's 165. You've made edits, so I don't know if it's changed. Okay, so yeah, now it's line 165. It's just that in this regulation, you're saying the terms primary supervisor and not defining it, and you have it beautifully defined in regulation. So perhaps you could add comma as defined in section 1387.1. Then it's clear for someone trying to know for sure how primary supervisor is defined. So it would just be comma as defined in section, lowercase s, 1387.1. Thank you. And then the last one is down subsection C1A. So it's line, whoop, oh, you just scrolled past it. Go back up. Line 169. Okay, that one's been corrected since I had last seen it. I'm happy. Oh, no. If the primary supervisor, no, that's fine. It's fine. I had an older copy. So those were my little edits. Thank you.
All right. Do we have a motion before us?
I don't think we're done yet. Sorry.
No worries.
I think the last one is just about inspection of examinations. And that's another.
Oh, okay.
We don't keep the examinations. That's an Office of Professional Examination Services. So removing that reference.
Got it. Thank you.
And that's it.
All right. Do we have a motion, or do we need like council to suggest the language for the motion?
Can the motion say that I move that we accept the changes provided by staff and as amended during this meeting? And also, would we say, and also delegate to staff any other non-substantive changes to be presented to the board at the May board meeting?
For recommendation.
Yes, for recommendation at the May board meeting.
I second.
All right, we have a motion by Dr. Harpsheets and a second by Mr. Fu. Any further discussion? Hearing none, let's open it up to public comments, please.
We are now accepting public comment on the motion. If you would like to make a comment, please type the word comment into the Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and send that comment to all participants. Dial-in users, please dial *3 to raise your hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. We're going to take about 15 seconds now to see if we get a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to return to the motion?
Yes, please. Ms. Furteau, can you call the roll for the votes?
Yes, Kasuga,
Aye.
Fu,
Aye.
Harpsheets.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, motion passes. Moving on, we are moving on to agenda item number 8, recommendations for agenda items for future committee meetings. Note that committee may not discuss or take action on any matter raised during this public comment section except to decide whether to place the matter on the agenda of a future meeting. Based on government code sections 1125 and 11125.7 subsection A. Committee members, any recommendations? Hearing none. Mr. Moderator, please open it up to public comments.
We are now accepting public comment on future recommendations for agenda items. If you would like to make a comment, please type the word comment into the Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and send that comment to all participants. Dial-in users, please dial *3 to raise your hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. We're going to take a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to return to the agenda?
Yes, please. Thank you so much. And before we adjourn for today, I would just like to thank the committee members for the discussion, the thoughtful discussion, as well as the board staff for all the work that was put into this meeting. And thank you, Mr. Moderator. And to all our public participants, I really appreciate the lively discussion that we had today. And with that, can I get a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Thank you so much, and have a good weekend to everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, there is a question on how many CPD credits can Ms. McCoran or someone from the board speak to that?
Ms. McCochran, can you answer the question?
May have already disconnected. Or no,
No, she's here. I see her name and she looks like she went off mute.
I see her that there's going to be 6 CPD hours for participation under CPT category number 1, attendance at a Board of Psychology meeting. For your records, please note today's date as April 28, 2023, the name of today's meeting, which is Ad Hoc Committee Meeting, and 6 CPD hours for your records. If you called in, email bopce@dca.ca.gov with your license number and phone number used. Thank you so much, and the meeting is adjourned.